We're here and we're honored to have Dr. Tom O'Brien. It's an amazing bio. You're like the Sherlock Holmes for inflammation, which it's so hard to talk about inflammation because I feel like it's almost like a catch-all phrase to describe every ill and nobody knows what causes it.
Right, right.
How'd you get into this?
Well, that's exactly right. How did I get into it? Well, that's an interesting way to start. 42 years ago, my ex and I could not get pregnant. I was an intern at the time, and I called the 7 most famous holistic doctors I'd ever heard of and said, "What do you do for infertility?" And they all told me what they do. I put a program together. We were pregnant in 6 weeks.
Wow.
My neighbors in married housing, they'd gone through artificial insemination. We lived on campus. They'd gone through artificial insemination and nothing had worked. And they asked if I'd work with them. And I thought, well, it's not going to hurt you. Sure. They were pregnant in 3 months. So we were 4 months pregnant now, really hot to trot to tell the world about some of the contributing factors for infertility and recurrent miscarriages. And so we tell our friends, and our friends would tell their sister in Wisconsin. I was in Chicago at the time. Their sister would drive down to Chicago and I'd treat them out of my dorm rooms, So we got started before getting into practice. And there's not much in medicine that's all or every, but this was every couple that had a problem with reproductive issues, whether it was premature ejaculation, low testosterone, recurrent miscarriages, infertility, didn't matter what it was. One of the components of their problem was that they were eating foods that they did not know were a problem for them, causing inflammation in their body. They didn't know because they didn't have any gut problems when they ate the food. But we now know for every one person that gets gut symptoms with a inflammatory reaction to food, there are 8 people that don't. They get brain symptoms or skin symptoms or joint symptoms. They don't get gut symptoms. So people don't know. People think that, well, as long as, I feel okay when I eat my pizza, you feel okay. And so you think you're okay, but next day you get a migraine, or next day you're in brain fog, or next day you get constipation, and you never tie the two together. So that started me off in my career, and my entire career has been following Dr. Jeffrey Bland and functional medicine. And I've been on the staff now for about 11 years, I think, at the Institute for Functional Medicine, just teaching all over the world about these concepts.
Yeah, I know Tom Ballew's a great guy.
Yeah, he is.
Really good guy. And I know a lot of functional medicine doctors, and it's amazing how Western medicine, we can go crazy about like Western medicine, how they don't get to the root cause. It's like troubleshooting is like, well, you have this problem, take the pill.
Well, they're not trained. They're just not trained. It's not their fault. The dean of medicine at Stanford was invited one year to be the commencement speaker for the medical school. And he said, "You're some of the best trained physicians in the entire world. We're so proud of you. Not much is going to get by you in terms of diagnosis. You know how to use the most sophisticated equipment, and you know how to deal with these diseases that you identify. But we have to apologize to you because 78% of what comes into your practice is not acute problems. They're chronic inflammatory diseases. And we have not trained you at all on how to deal with chronic inflammatory diseases." So they just don't know. And they think they know healthcare, but what they've been trained in is crisis care. They just don't know.
Well, why, when you think about modern times versus like cave era, did cavemen have inflammation, or is this something that we've created through just the chemicals we use?
Understood. We've always had inflammation is really good for you. Excessive inflammation is not good for you. But inflammation protects us. We have the same body as our ancestors thousands of years ago. The same kidney function, the same gallbladder function, the same joint function, the same lubricants on the joints. the same immune system. And our ancestors, the immune system was designed to protect them from 6 things: bugs, parasites, viruses, mold, fungus, and bacteria.
Mhm.
That's all they were exposed to. And their immune systems would protect them from a bad bug that in the water they were drinking or whatever it was. Our immune systems are exactly the same. And the immune system can protect you efficiently from a bug, parasite, virus, mold, fungus, or bacteria. But when we're exposed to excessive levels of mercury, as an example, because you eat too much tuna fish, and all the tuna fish now, except for very rare situations, is high in mercury. It's the poisoning of the planet. You know, you can't do anything about that. So you've got mercury toxicity. Your immune system is going to respond like a bug, parasite, virus, mold, fungus, or bacteria. It can't respond any other way.
It gets triggered all the time.
It gets triggered all the time. You hit it right on the head. And the reason, for example, Blue Cross Blue Shield published 2 years ago, they said, we've got a real problem here, that the incidence of newly diagnosed cases of Alzheimer's between 2013 and 2017, in 4 years, increased 407% in 4 years in 30 to 44-year-olds. We've got a huge problem that nobody's talking about, and it's because the generations now are being exposed to larger volumes of chemicals at earlier stages of life and in utero. And so we're inflamed so much more all the time than ever before, not just because of the toxins in the environment, which is very real, but also the toxins that have accumulated inside our bodies. So you have to detox to get this stuff out that's already inside your body.
Yeah, I read this really interesting article that said obesity rates have increased. And even though we're dieting more, they continue to increase. But what was interesting was it said that before 1980, obesity rates were low all over the world. And then something happened, and it was almost like they were trying to figure it out. They said something happened where obesity rates shot through the roof, and there's a chemical. They believe there's something in our food that we eat or something unrelated to calories that's causing that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There is. And it's the impact of the insecticides, pesticides, fungicides, rodenticides in our food on our microbiome.
Yes.
And you've changed the microbiome to a microbiome that, you know, there's higher numbers of the bacteria that hoard calories. It doesn't matter what you eat, you're going to hoard calories, as opposed to the.
That's right.
You know, the classic example is Pima Indians in the Southwest U.S. that if you go across the border into Mexico, genetically, they're the same peoples, both north of the border and south of the border. But the south of the border people are living closer to their ancestors in lifestyle, beans and rice and things like that. Whereas north of the border, they're eating Pringles and French fries and McDonald's. And the incidence of obesity and type 2 diabetes at 35 years old in the Pima Indians south of the border is 5 to 7%. The incidence of obesity in 35-year-old Pima Indians north of the border is 55% at 35 years old. It's their microbiome that's been changed, and so the microbiome hoards more calories. That's why if there's only one thing you're going to do to get healthy, you want to hack your health. The most powerful thing you can do long-term for vibrant quality of life is build a healthy microbiome. Nothing has more impact throughout your system as a healthy microbiome.
So let's talk about how do we build a healthy microbiome?
The first thing you have to do is stop throwing gasoline on the fire. You have to find out where your exposures are coming from that's causing so much inflammation. Listen, the National Institute of Health tells us that 14 of the top 15 causes of death in the world today are chronic inflammatory diseases. Everything except unintentional injuries, accidents, everything else is a chronic inflammatory disease. So do you think it's important to reduce inflammation? Because the definition chronic means it's going on for years and you don't know about it. And it's killing off cells, killing off cells. So you first have to recognize you've got chronic inflammation. And there's easy tests to identify that now. They are right on the money, right on the money. And when you find out—
what kind of testing is it? Is it?
It's a blood test. It's a blood test.
Like C-reactive protein, or like?
C-reactive protein came out in 1986. So it's an okay test. It tells you about systemic inflammation, but there's testing now available. The lab opened in 2015. Mayo Clinic calls it a new era in laboratory medicine. And, you know, you've got and people don't know this. Doctors don't know this. They don't think about it. If I were to tell you in 1990, so, 25, 30 years ago, if I was going to tell you that, I'm going to hold this thing in my hand, it's about the size of my wallet, and I'm just going to push a couple of buttons on here. And when I do that, if I push a couple of buttons, I can tell you within 5 seconds that the air particulate matter in Spiazzo, Italy right now is 9. Good day to exercise outside. But Chicago's 46. That's okay. That's okay. But San Antonio, don't go outside and exercise today in San Antonio. The air is really bad. If I were to tell
that's
you,
the AQI, right?
say
AQI?
again?
The AQI, the air quality index?
The air quality index, yeah.
It's 35 in Miami right now.
If I were to tell you 25 years ago, I can pull up that information anywhere in the world in 5 seconds.
Yeah, you're crazy.
You would have thought I was watching too much Star Trek. So unfortunately, most of our doctors are using laboratory tests that were developed in 1980, 1990, right. 2000. They're not using current tests. So the accuracy of those tests is way off. And I challenge doctors all the time. I said, you have to do the double standard. And they look at me and I say, when you draw blood, draw a second tube of blood in the same blood draw. Label the second tube with a different name. Order the same test. The doctor has to pay for that second fake name. You can't charge the patient or the insurance company. It'll cost you a few $100, but now you're going to see how accurate your laboratory is. Because when the test results come back, sometimes they're very different.
Wow.
And which test are you going to talk to the patient about? The one
That's
where
scary.
they're okay or the one where they have a problem?
That's scary.
So it is very scary. But there's new technology that came out in 2015. Mayo Clinic published on it, and they said, this is a new era in laboratory medicine. The accuracy, it's called sensitivity and specificity, is 97 to 100%, meaning right on the money every time. And these tests are called the Zoomers because you zoom in on the problem. And you do the wheat Zoomer, and you do the neural Zoomer plus. And every patient that I see gets those 2 tests done, every one. And you say, oh my God, my brain's on fire. I didn't know that. I feel fine. Well, here's the results. Highly accurate tests that you've got 18 different antibodies elevated in your brain right now, killing off brain cells, killing off brain cells, killing off brain cells. And then you have to explore why is that happening and what to do about it.
So step 1, we test.
Test, don't guess.
Test, don't guess. Step 2 is once you test, then how do you figure out what's causing the inflammation?
Well, that's a weekend course at the minimum, but the most common here's a way of thinking about it. Professor Alessio Fasano is at Harvard. He's a dean of medicine. He's a professor of medicine, Harvard Medical School, professor of nutrition, Harvard School of Public Health, the director of Mucosal Immunology Center. That's the lining of your lungs, the lining of your gut, the lining of your brain at Harvard, the director of the Celiac Research Center at Harvard, and the chief of pediatric gastroenterology at Mass General, Harvard. This guy's got 5 titles. Any one title is a lifelong goal for people at the top of their game. He's got 5. So I don't know that there's many people more credible in the world to listen to than Fasano. And he tells us, he describes what he calls the perfect, he's always so careful about what he says, always. But he published this paper just about 2 years ago that says it all. The title of the paper, All Disease Begins in the, quote, leaky gut.
What? Okay.
The role of the protein zonulin in the development of chronic inflammatory diseases. So, and this is what they're teaching at Harvard Medical School right now, which is so cool that these young people are getting this as basic 101 for them. Fasano talks about 5 pillars in the development of chronic inflammatory diseases. 14 of the top 15 causes of death are chronic inflammatory diseases. Do you think this is important? This is so critical to understand as an individual if you don't want to go down and your last third of your life is degenerating with a chronic inflammatory disease. You need to understand the 5 pillars in the development of chronic inflammatory diseases. Number 1, your genetics. You can't do anything about the genes. You got the Alzheimer's gene, you got the gene. You got the breast cancer gene, you got the gene. It doesn't mean you're getting breast cancer or Alzheimer's. It means if you pull at the chain always breaks at the weakest link. It's at one end, the middle, the other end. It's your heart, your brain, your liver, your kidneys, wherever your genetic weak link is. You pull too hard, that's where the chain's going to break. Does that make sense?
It does. Do you test for that? Like when you're testing?
Of course.
Okay,
Of course.
So you do the gene test.
And so that's number 1. And doctors say all the time, well, let's turn those genes off. You can't turn genes off. Genes operate on dimmer switches, and you can dim down the genes of inflammation, and you can ramp up the genes of anti-inflammation when you understand the second pillar. The first pillar is your genes. The second pillar is environmental triggers. It's what we are exposed to. And the most common environmental trigger is what's on the end of your fork. That's most common. And we're eating foods that create all this inflammation in our body. And we don't know it because it doesn't hurt our stomach and we don't get gut pain. So we think it's okay to eat it. So that's number 2 is environmental triggers.
Let's talk about that real quick. So when we talk about things, and I know we talk about things like gluten or sugar, is there any tips or anything you could give someone when it comes to eating, anything that we just always need to stay away from?
Well, the rule is test, don't guess, and do the right test.
So the test will tell you what to stay away from.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, that's awesome.
If you go to my website, thedr.com, thedoctor.com, and download the information about the tests on the Wheat Zoomer and the Neural Zoomer Plus, and you download this information, take it to your doctor and say, would you please order these tests for me? And if they say no, then order it on my site and we'll send you the kit to do it. And we'll help you get it all organized to do it. But I'd much rather you go to your doctor so that they learn about these tests, right?
All right.
So that's number 2 is environmental triggers.
Okay.
Number 3, when you're taking these environmental triggers that are inflammatory, you kill off the good guys in your gut and you allow more bad guys to develop, because 70% of the immune system is in your gut. And that's because that's where our ancestors were exposed more to a threat than anywhere else, was in their gut. So 70% of the immune system's in the gut. And when you eat these inflammatory foods, and drinking Coca-Cola or whatever else you're doing, that, sugared iced tea with full of chemicals, whatever you're doing, you kill off the good guys in your gut. You allow more bad guys to develop, and that's called dysbiosis. That's the geek term, dysbiosis. So the environmental triggers create number 3, dysbiosis in the gut. Now, Mrs. Patient, your digestive system is a tube. It starts at the mouth and goes to the other end, winds around in the center. If you think of a donut, If you could stretch a donut out, one big long donut, and you look down the center of the donut, that's your digestive system from the mouth to the other end. It's one big long tube. When you swallow a bite of hamburger, how do the proteins get to your muscles to make new muscle cells? Well, they're in the donut. They're not in the body yet. They're still in the donut. And they've got to be digested. You think of protein like a pearl necklace. Hydrochloric acid undoes the clasp of the pearl necklace. Now you have a string of pearls, and your enzymes act like scissors to cut, snip, 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 until you're down to each pearl of the pearl necklace. That's called an amino acid. Okay. Now, the inside of the tube is lined with cheesecloth. And so only really small molecules can get through the cheesecloth into the bloodstream. That's the way that we're supposed to absorb our foods. And if the molecule is too big, it can't get through. It's got to go further down the 20 feet, being snip, 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 until it's small enough to go through the cheesecloth. But when you have dysbiosis, number 3, too much inflammation in the gut, you tear the cheesecloth. That's leaky gut.
Okay, got it.
When you tear the cheesecloth, now bigger molecules called macromolecules get through into the bloodstream before they've been broken down small enough. They got through the tears in the cheesecloth. And now you got these big molecules in the bloodstream, and your bloodstream's just a highway. You know, all the traffic's going the same direction, but it's just a highway. And now your immune system says, what's that on the highway? That's not something I can use to make new muscle cells or brain cells. I better fight that. And now you make antibodies to chicken or to potatoes or to tomatoes or to beef. It doesn't matter what the food is. If you've got dysbiosis because too many environmental triggers, the inflammation created dysbiosis tears the cheesecloth, macromolecules get through in the bloodstream. Now your immune system trying to protect you creates number 5, which is chronic systemic inflammation. This is what they're teaching at Harvard Medical School. All disease begins in the gut. And if you're only going to do one thing, it's going to be that you build the healthiest microbiome that you can.
So if somebody gets tested, they're out of whack, their genetics are bad, they're having all these symptoms associated with the CSI there, how do they fix it? Like, how long does it take to fix it? I know this is what your passion's about, so.
Yeah, it takes 6 months to 2 years. There's no magic pill. Everybody wants a magic pill. How am I going to hack my health? Give me a magic pill. You know what? You'll take a magic pill. You'll feel great for a few months, maybe a year or two. But if you've got chronic inflammation, you're going down. That's the bottom line. The inflammation is what kills us, slowly and surely, killing off cells. I don't care if you do stem cells. I don't care if you get injections and you enlarge your manhood and you feel really good about that. That's great, man. You go for it, but you're still going down.
Love this.
You can't argue with nature.
Well, you know, I know when we started, you told me you're in Costa Rica, and I'm thinking about blue zones. And I know that Costa Rica is known for blue zones. And like when you see these blue zones all over the world, is that because people are in an environment that they don't have inflammation?
No, they don't have excess inflammation.
Everybody has inflammation, but they aren't getting killed off by it early. They're living longer.
That's exactly right. You know, it's one of the must reads for all of my patients is the book, The Blue Zones by Dan Buettner. And what he tells us is that there are 9 factors to a blue zone lifestyle. And, you know, you can't take some mushroom and expect living the same lifestyle that you aren't going to go down. It's unfortunate, you know, we all would like, you know, I know the name of your podcast is Health Hacks. So you want a health hack? Get educated. Learn what your lifestyle is doing that's causing all the systemic inflammation. Anything short of that, and you're going to look back in 15 years and say, damn, I wish I had taken more notice of this.
So if somebody says, okay, I'm not going to move to Costa Rica, I need to change my life. I know there's no magic bullets. I get tested. What, like, I have to eat better. What else should I be doing to fix
Yeah,
my leaky gut?
understood, understood. In my book, and this is all in both of my books, but in the second book, which is called You Can Fix Your Brain. And I went around with Rodale Press for 2 weeks on the title. They wanted some different. No, no, no. The message is you can fix your brain because the brain's the canary in the coal mine. You know, that's the first thing that's going down for most of us. And then we joke about it or we just don't know what to do. But what can you do? First, you get tested. You find out where the major sources of environmental triggers causing inflammation are coming from. Second, you get tested for your microbiome to measure how bad is it right now. And it's going to be bad. It's going to be bad. That's okay. Because in 6 months, you're going to recheck and say, oh, look, it's 30% better. What I'm doing is working. Well, wait a minute. I want to fix it now. What's the health hacks? Like what bacteria can I take? Lactobacillus, bifidobacteria. What can I take so it gets better right away? There's nothing you can take. If you think, Jeff Bland is a friend of mine, and I interviewed Dr. Bland last year, and he said, Tom, a teaspoon of stool has more bacteria than all the stars in the known universe.
Wow.
Exactly. And when you think about that for a minute, how much bacteria is in our gut. You know, there was a movie that came out in 1966 called Fantastic Voyage. It was nominated for 5 Oscars for cinematography and all that, and it won 3. But they shrunk a submarine and the people in the submarine to go into the tear duct of a famous scientist who had a stroke, and there was a clot that they couldn't get to. So they were sending the submarine in to go after the clot. And it was a great movie, 1966, you know. But if you could imagine being inside the gut with the volume of bacteria, that's, wow, that's what lactobacillus looks. Oh my gosh, that's Klebsiella. That's really bad, guys. Oh my God, there's Pseudomonas. Wow, this guy's got an infection. That's a bad infection. And you see, if you can imagine this 25 feet of tube that's just loaded with bacteria, and there's too many bad guys, not enough good guys, which is what causes the systemic inflammation, then you start to understand what it takes to rebuild that the environment inside that tube. It takes months and months and months to do it. But every day is a step in the right direction, building more good bacteria, building more good bacteria.
And real quick, what are the supplements we should be taking every single day to help our microbiome?
Well, there's a few things. The first, Mrs. Patient, when you go shopping and buy your fruits and vegetables, always organic, many reasons why, but organic, but buy a couple of every root vegetable in the store, every root vegetable, rutabagas, turnips, parsnips, carrots, sweet potatoes, radishes. And we've all been to a restaurant where they shave a raw radish and put it on the salad. And you say, oh, that tastes pretty good. So, well, I don't eat radishes. Yes, you do. And, you know, just little bits. Or well, what about a turnip? I don't know what to do with a turnip. You dice it up, slice an onion, peel some garlic, a little coconut oil in the pan or avocado oil, saute it till it's soft, put some peanut sauce on it or whatever you want, and you eat it. Okay, what about parsnips? You dice them up, saute an onion, peel some garlic, add a little oil, soften it up, add a sauce to it, and you eat it. You don't have to be Julia Child to eat root vegetables. You just need to get them down there, because the fibers of the root vegetables feed different families of good bacteria. And you don't want to just eat carrots. Carrots are good for you, but the good bacteria that's fed by rutabaga is very different than the good bacteria that's fed by radishes. So you want to alternate. So you're feeding all the families every week with a little bit of the good bacteria, or with a little bit of the fibers that feed the good bacteria. That's number one. Number two, Mrs. Patient, go on Google, type in list of prebiotic foods, not probiotics, prebiotic foods. That's like root vegetables. They're the foods that feed the good bacteria. And you're going to find out a banana's a prebiotic. An onion is a prebiotic. Garlic is a prebiotic. You don't have to eat chicory every day, this weird stuff. You'll find a list of foods. Oh, that's okay. And you have 2 from the list and 1 root vegetable every day, without exception. Because what you're doing is feeding the good bacteria. And these don't feed the bad bacteria. They only feed the good bacteria. Next, Mrs. Patient, get 5 different types of fermented vegetables. Get sauerkraut, kimchi, miso, fermented beets, curry flavored, whatever you like. And every day you work up to having a tablespoon of fermented vegetables every day. And you have a little breakfast, a little bit of lunch, a little bit of dinner, so that it adds up to a tablespoon a day. And you increase the inoculation in your gut 10,000-fold by a tablespoon a day. And don't just eat sauerkraut. Sauerkraut's good for you, but every family of fermented vegetables inoculates with different families of the good bacteria. So you want to alternate the good bacteria that you're doing. Next, buy 15 or 20 apples, always organic. Take them home, wash them, cut out the seeds, dice them up, put them in a pot. If the apples are this high in the pot, add 1/3 the height of water, a little bit of cinnamon, some raisins, turn it on high to boil. In 12 to 15 minutes, you got applesauce. That's all it takes. Now, my wife likes to put it in the blender to make it creamy. I like it with the chunky. You know, both ways are great. But apples are high in pectin. Pectin feeds arguably the most important enzyme in your gut called intestinal alkaline phosphatase, IAP. And IAP feeds the good bacteria, fights the bad bacteria, helps the good bacteria grab onto the walls, lowers your cholesterol, stabilizes blood sugar, increases insulin sensitivity, many, many benefits to IAP. And so you have at least a couple tablespoons of fresh applesauce every day. The commercial stuff doesn't do it. Has to be fresh. And you know, it lasts for 4 or 5 days, and then you make some more. Next, a cup of bone broth a day, if you can, or at least a couple times a week. Organic bone broth. Organic bone broth is high in gelatin tannate. Gelatin tannate acts like a seal on the inside lining of your gut. You know, you're playing with the kids with a pair of shorts on and you slide on the carpet, you get a carpet burn. When you put your pants on, it really hurts the knee. That carpet burn hurts your knee. That's leaky gut. It's like a carpet burn on the inside lining of your gut. When you drink bone broth, it puts a seal over the leaky gut so that tissue can heal quicker. So that it's like wearing pants when you've got a knee carpet burn. Those are some basic things. And for supplements, we recommend people take a prebiotic and a probiotic for 3 months while they're transitioning their lifestyle. And the last thing that we recommend is called colostrum. And it's Mother Nature's way of healing a leaky gut. And the colostrum on our site, it's the best in the world. The 3 countries of Africa license it as the treatment of choice, and they pay for it if somebody's diagnosed with HIV, because it really works to calm down the gut and help to absorb, heal the leaky gut. It's just a remarkable product, and we'll recommend that they include that for the first 3 months or so.
So this is amazing. So anybody listening to this, the best thing is to get educated. Now, you've written a couple books. So if they go to your website, The Doctor, that's spelled THEDR.com.
That's right.
They can get educated. They could read your books, and then they can also get tested, right? So if their doctor is from the 20th century and he is not up to testing, you can test.
That's correct.
So if they get tested, who goes over the results with them?
The laboratory who offers the test. They've got an interpretation
Awesome.
service available. And for practitioners, there's lots of trainings they can do. We've trained lots of doctors around the world and health coaches on this.
That's amazing. So if they get tested, they don't have a doctor that's a functional doctor. You have a network of doctors you can send them to where they can interpret the test and make recommendations.
That's correct.
Amazing. And then everything they need from the colostrum to any other supplements that support and fight against leaky gut, you have them on the website as well.
Those are on our website, yes. But our emphasis is you have to change the lifestyle. And so you're training your body to look for and enjoy the foods that feed a healthy microbiome. Critically important to reduce the level of systemic inflammation.
I love this, and I agree with you. There is no hack. There's no magic bullet. It's all about lifestyle and educating it. I appreciate the time. I really thank you. It's just an honor talking to you. It really is.
Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure talking to you. And for everyone listening out there, have patience and just keep moving forward.